Hello and welcome to WOLV-TV Spotlight. I'm Sean Henderson, and today I am joined by an incredible guest, screenwriter Hillary Seitz. Hillary graduated from Yale and moved to LA in 1992, and 33 years since then, she has worked with some of Hollywood's biggest names, from Christopher Nolan to Sandra Bullock in movies like Insomnia and The Unforgivable. Hillary, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So I just kind of wanted to start today talking about the beginning of your career, because as I just mentioned, you moved to LA after graduating from Yale in 1992, and you didn't really have as much of a game plan as people nowadays do.
That's putting it kindly.
And then 10 years later, your first movie, Insomnia, came out. So I was just wondering if you could tell me about those 10 years and what made you decide to pursue screenwriting.
I sort of bumbled into it, like pretty much everything else in my life. I feel like if I had made it a sort of self-directed move, it wouldn't have worked. If I had gone to LA to be a screenwriter, I don't think I'd be sitting here right now. So I actually graduated from Yale in 1991, and then I went for a year and went and taught English in a small town in what is now the Czech Republic, but was then Czechoslovakia. Slightly lost, didn't know what to do. And then I moved to LA after that because there was a boy. So that literally is what it was. So I ended up marrying him. So I went there because he was there at USC doing the a master's program for film production. So I went out there to join him because I kind of didn't know what else to do. And LA slightly bewildered me. It's a strange town, and it takes quite a few years to kind of penetrate that membrane before getting very familiar with it. It's not quite as obvious as a lot of other cities, but then once you get past that mark, you become fiercely loyal. So, like anyone in their early 20s, I had no money. So I had a friend who worked at a production company, and she got me in touch with someone who ran their reader program. And what that is production companies and studios and sometimes agencies, they get a lot of unsolicited scripts. And instead of tossing them because they haven't come through, official channels, there's always, maybe gold in those hills. So they hire readers who will read the scripts and summarize them and then do something, it's called coverage. Yeah. You summarize it for a couple pages, and then you've got a page where you evaluate the script. It was a good idea. I don't think the writing was so good, or the writer is really good. I'm not sure about the idea. So I got into that, and I read for 3 companies, and it was $50 a script, which was like a king's ransom. Yeah. So I read like 3 or 4 scripts a day. And sometimes I'd read books also that were up maybe to be adapted, and that was like $65. And so I did that for about a year and a half, not realizing that I was getting a crash course in screenwriting. Yeah. So as I read them, I just had an idea for a screenplay, and I just wrote a little dark comedy just on my own, just for fun. I had no plans for it, but my boss at one of the production companies became my friend. We were a similar age, and she came to me and said, we've got this, it was New Regency, we've got this romantic comedy, we don't know what to do with it. We've had 7 writers work on it, and we just have sort of thrown our hands up in the air. Do you want to take a look at it? Mm-hmm. And because I had nothing to lose, which is the best position to be in, I read it, and to me it's sort of like all the life had been beaten out of it because too many hands had been on it. Yeah. So I said, well, I can understand sort of what you're looking for, but I would toss the whole thing, and here's what I would do. Mm-hmm. And she, to her credit, Cara Francis, I always mention her because I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. She brought me to all the executives at New Regency and had me pitch. And I got the job. Yeah. And then because I got the job, I got an agent. And then I've been employed ever since. So a lot of it was like anything, a little bit of luck, a little bit of opportunity, being ready. I had written that script so I could say, here's a writing sample. So that was helpful. But it's very serendipitous. Yeah. Yeah.
And you just talked about that being a romantic comedy, actually. A lot of your work has been in the thriller kind of space, some suspense and stuff like that. So what kind of drew you into that genre as opposed to just continuing with romantic comedies?
I did start with comedy, and I really like comedy. And then I sort of got tugged into because my first big thing was Insomnia, which is a thriller, as you know. And I just really loved, some thrillers have a slightly literary aspect to them, and I don't want to sound pretentious, but I like that. Yeah. And they really take their time. They're kind of a slow burn, which I appreciated. But I've been thinking lately, I need to get back to comedy, because I think that sometimes you can get a little pigeonholed.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be pigeonholed as just like thriller, horror,
Yeah.
drama. I've done some dramas, but mostly thriller and horror when you think about it. And I enjoy that, but I think when you do something for too long, you start to get a little flabby.
Yeah.
And you start to like have the same grab bag of tricks. And
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm not doing that. And I just want to challenge myself a little bit. So let's see. I mean, I've got the next few things I'm working on are thrillers or, but maybe after that I'll do, do something funny.
Something to keep the spark kind of alive.
Yeah. And, challenge myself.
Yeah.
Don't get too comfortable.
And you mentioned Insomnia, just to stay on that movie for a second. You worked on that movie with Christopher Nolan. He directed it, and he's still coming off his big Oscar wins in 2024 for Oppenheimer, Best Director and Best Picture. Can you just talk a little bit about working with him and what you both kind of gained from that experience, pretty early on in both of your careers?
He gained a lot from me. Yeah. He was great. Like at that point, he'd done Memento, which is a fantastic movie. And it will be a shock for you to hear that we had to really fight to get him on Insomnia because he had actually come to Warner Brothers as a young filmmaker. I think he had done Memento by that time and said, there's this great Scandinavian movie called Insomnia, and I'd really love to do an adaptation of that. And they were like, who are you by? And so when we saw Insomnia, we being me and the producers and an executive at Warner Brothers at that time, we saw Insomnia. We're like, this guy is brilliant. So we really had to push to get him on. He lived in a dinky little apartment. I lived in a dinky little apartment. I walked to his apartment and we would go over the script and work on it together. And he was great. And we laughed a lot, which is kind of funny because he's a very serious, and his subject matters are very somber. But what I really appreciated about him is class act. And I would really appreciate about him is that he had every right in the world to be pretentious, because Memento is like a kind of a indie darling. Yeah. He's very lauded for it, as he should be. I think it's a fantastic movie, but he never pulled any of that. And he always stopped to say, what is the audience experiencing right now? If your audience, what do you need right now? He always had his mind on the audience. And I thought that I was really impressed by that. I loved that he was someone who was a filmmaker who was thinking about the audience all the time. Yeah. It was a wonderful quality of his. Yeah, not just held on to, obviously.
Not just thinking about what he wants it to be, but what's going to also
the experience of the audience. It's not just his playground. Like, it's for people to watch. And not every director's like that. And I really appreciated that about him.
And what I think is so interesting about Insomnia is the way that it takes place really entirely with the sun out, because it takes place in Night Mute, Alaska, where the sun never really sets. But it's also a suspense movie. It's a thriller, as we just kind of talked about. So what was it like writing these suspenseful, gripping scenes, but also not having use of night? Because a lot of thrillers and just movies in that space use night to kind of add to the intensity.
Well, scary is scary, right? Thrilling is thrilling. And it's sort of like, I'm a little bit more scared of an evil woman than I am of an evil man. It's sort of flipping a little bit of an archetype on its ear. When I did research for the movie, I went to Alaska just to see what it felt like. But I went to Alaska in December because I had to write the movie, so I couldn't wait until 24-hour sunlight. But it had the same effect of just like your, the circadian rhythms sort of being put on their ear. I remember going there and the sun rose-ish. It never went up. Like, it was always just hovering above the horizon at, 11:30 in the morning, and then would start to set at about 2:15. Yeah. And again, it was never full blazing sunlight. It was always felt like dusk always. Okay. I would wake up in my little hotel. By the way, there was no hotels available. They just left a key out for me and a space heater because they're like, why are you coming to Seward, Alaska in December? But I would wake up and I'd hear kids playing at recess, and it was pitch black outside. So it was a really cool experience. Yeah. So to me, because something is supposed to be night, but it's still daylight, adds to the thrilling aspect, because it's all about knocking you off of your state of comfort, right? It's all about, if you're used to a particular rhythm, especially as an animal, we are animals, so we take a lot of our cues from nature. And when that is just not coming through for us, that's going to add to the intensity. So I think it helped that it was constantly daylight, and then it gave you that sort of Cask of the Amontillado 2 sense of like trying to block out the sun,
Yeah.
whatever you do, because the light was his guilt, the light
Yeah.
was the truth, So the desperation, and the less sleep you get, the more desperate you get. So that just adds to the whole feeling of everything sort of being on tenterhooks.
Yeah, and with Insomnia and Eagle Eye, phones are a big part of the plot because
Yeah.
as a means of manipulating the character, I mean, Walker Finch, played by Robin Williams, manipulates Will Dormer, and in Eagle Eye, Jerry and Rachel are both coerced using the phone. And Insomnia is a remake, so you don't have as much, like, you can fully tweak there, but
Right.
Eagle Eye, at least you got to do a lot just creative in terms of creative freedom there. So what made you guys just decide to use phones as such a crucial part of that plot?
Do you mean for Eagle Eye? Or
Yes, for Eagle Eye.
I mean, well, Eagle Eye was all about sort of being watched,
Mhm.
right? And what's sort of interesting about it, someone else asked this the other day, if I had rewatched it, and I hadn't. I haven't since it came out. I think it would almost be quaint now, because back then it had such a claustrophobic feeling of we're watched everywhere and we're tracked everywhere, and it's nothing. It's like romper room compared to what it is right now. So just the use of phones, that was right around the time when they were starting to become ubiquitous, right? And not only as just modes of communication, but also modes of tracking. So it just naturally worked itself into sort of a paranoid plot.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about, just given the current conversations on artificial intelligence and privacy, kind of what your thoughts were on Eagle Eye, but
I mean, that's hot button.
Yeah.
That's hot button. I will tell you though, it's a little off-piste, but I feel like in 2 generations, people will be writing letters with pen and paper again, because I think with this sort of the technology is far outstripping our ability to process it as humans, and so there's going to be, I think, a scramble and a need and a craving for the analog. So I really do believe that, and I think it's going to show itself in different ways. It's sort of like, I know it's a hipster thing, but people going back to typewriters or grounded telephones, or I think that's gonna come back, because with AI you lose authenticity, you lose the certainty of the source, and that's spooky. So pen and paper, you know who it came from.
yeah, I just remember watching it and I was like, wow, this feels very true to kind of where we're at now, to a bit of a scary standpoint almost.
Yeah, and it's just gonna keep rolling.
But going back to Eagle Eye on the phone call standpoint, how is it writing these big, like, kind of important pieces of dialogue when characters might not be in the same room, and this could go for Insomnia too? How is it trying to make sure everything's conveyed within those lines when phones are being used instead of face-to-face conversation?
Well, good acting
Yeah.
is one, and also good actors stay and will do the other part of the conversation off screen with the actor. Whoever's having the phone call, whoever they're supposed to be having the phone call with, that actor will be there and will do the lines with them. So that's super helpful. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes the actor doesn't want to do it, or they're busy or whatever, so they'll get, some poor PA to do it or something. But good acting. It's good acting.
And one more thing about the timeliness of Eagle Eye, actually. There's also a line in there, Tom Morgan says this is a bad time to be in the terrorism business, and that was 2008, which is still very much during the War on Terror. What was it like to write a movie that was so timely during this period in American history?
I mean, it did feel, and it's also Spielberg, right? So it feels very like touching the nerve. And I think that it's also the recession, 2008. Like, there was definitely a sense of losing control a little bit, and kind of wheeling out of control. It's very, it was very electric. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and you were talking about control. I think even in the movie itself with Aria, the program going out of control, there's control on many levels going on. Both
Look at
in
you with
the
all your research. Well done. I don't remember half of it. It was so long ago.
both on the domestic level and the international level there.
Yeah.
So control's really kind of
Yeah.
something not really overt there, but it's still very present.
Insidious.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good word for it in that context, yeah.
Yeah.
And then before talking about The Unforgivable, I just kind of want to talk about, you also have done some work as a script doctor as
Yes.
opposed to being a screenwriter, so you've done movies like Enchanted and iRobot. I just was wondering what your day-to-day looked like when you're kind of working in that capacity instead of as a screenwriter.
I mean, I really like script doctoring, and I've done a lot of it. It's I like getting a script that isn't working for some reason and just trying to figure out what it is. And you have the benefit. I mean, I'll sometimes get a script and the poor people who've been living with it for so long are just like pulling their hair out, and they don't know what isn't quite working about it. And that's just because they've been living on the inside with it for too long. And I can come waltzing in and be like, oh, because that character has to die, And they're like, what? Oh, yes, you're right. So I really love coming in and not being hampered by having a history with the project and just being like, almost like a mercenary, just going and being like, oh, here's I think what the problem is. So I really, really enjoy that. There's something else that I really love to do, which are production rewrites. They're fewer and far between now. There used to be a lot of them, but they're fewer and far between, which is and I've done a bunch of them where you're writing a script literally as they're shooting.
Yeah.
So I'll have dinner. I was having dinner once. I worked on The Italian Job, and I remember sitting and having dinner, and the phone rang, and it was the director saying, okay, so we're in the middle of Mark Wahlberg's dialogue, his monologue, and it's not quite working. Can we, how can we change this? So they were all standing there waiting, and I was like, okay, let me figure this out. So that is really fun too, because it's like high adrenaline, because everyone's waiting and like change it right now. So I really enjoy that too.
Yeah, and so just like you were saying, the high adrenaline, but also the fresh perspective is obviously very big, because if you're stuck with it for too long, you might get caught in a rut and things like that.
Exactly.
And then just staying on this point, just in terms of a day-to-day, like when you're script doctoring, how do you kind of go about that process as opposed to writing a script from scratch?
I think it's basically the same process. You just mean like a writing process?
Yeah, just kind of coming into a story while it's already a little bit further along.
Well, I always transcribe. So I don't get the final draft software of the script as it stands, and I don't go in and sort of surgically change things within scenes. I will print out the script, old-fashioned, and I will retype the entire thing, because it helps me get into the tone and the voice of the project. And also I feel like, if you say, well, the main character is Sean, and he's got, he's OCD. So he can be OCD in this scene, he can be OCD in that scene. Those would be good. Well, okay, but he can also be OCD here, and you can have traces of OCD there, and you can have someone mention it over here. So I think that, for me, screenwriting is kind of always planting seeds along the way that sprout later on. So if I don't know the entire script fluently, then I don't know the good places to put those seeds and the good places to harvest those seeds.
Okay. Yeah.
So also, every time I sit down, I always retype the last 5 pages I wrote again, just to get into it. But I get to the point where I've practically memorized the script. Yeah. Because I just want to be able to, in my head, be like, oh, wait, the little Billy has to go to school. Well, oh, wait, he can do that back at that scene because his nanny's with him. So I can put it in there. So if you have a real fluency within the story, it really helps with the rewrite process, or, starting something from scratch.
Yeah, and you were talking about planting seeds. I think that gradual development to kind of make a character's journey worthwhile is something a lot of viewers especially just really kind of take satisfaction in.
Yeah, I agree.
And then to go back to The Unforgivable, to talk about your movies again, that you've been a screenwriter for. In that movie, familial love is kind of a big guiding factor in a lot of characters' decisions, be it Ruth's desire to be reunited with her sister, Steve's decision to try and avenge his father, or just the Malcolm parents trying to keep their family safe and intact. I was just wondering if your relationship with your family kind of influenced the writing process at all there.
I have a really good relationship with my family. Yeah. But I think it's sort of like as old as time. Isn't that just what everything goes back to? Every Homeric story, everything, every religion, every legend, every lore goes back to family. Yeah. I think that is like the sweet spot of every story. It's like it's either overt or not, but it's always there.
Yeah. And what was it like for that movie, kind of playing with the past a bit more, because you were able to work with flashback sequences?
I'm not a big lover of flashbacks, but I saw the necessity for them to tell that story, and I thought they were very elegantly done in the final. I was one of a few writers on that project, so I'm not the final writer on that project, but I thought they were very elegantly done, and because sometimes they can be a little ham-handed and a little, they're kind of like a brass band sometimes. but they were so beautifully integrated. So I think they worked well. They were quite poetic, I found.
Yeah, I remember watching it, and it kind of came in at the right places in time to complete the story, not give everything away.
It has to have a flow.
Yeah.
Some can be kind of herky-jerky, and they had a really nice flow to them.
Yeah, you pieced the plot together as you went along, didn't shove everything in your face.
Exactly. Hold back the news.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And with that movie and with Insomnia, to kind of tie those two together, there's a lot of just characters dealing with trauma and guilt from the past, or from, in the case of Insomnia, the events of the movie. Is there anything that draws you to kind of tell these types of stories with trauma, guilt, and the like?
Yes. I'm always drawn to very dark stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because I'm a dark person. It's because I feel very strongly that the darker something is, the stronger a shaft of light is. So I feel like the greatest act of cruelty is just as strong as the smallest act of kindness. So it also brings into very fast and sharp relief who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
When you are dealing with trauma, or when you are under duress, or when you are in extremis. I love stories where people are in extremis. Like my favorite, I have a bookshelf at home that are all nautical disasters because I love stories about ships that sink and how people made it. Because that is who you really are. So I like really flawed people because I sympathize with flawed people, and I think everybody's flawed. I don't love like a Captain America, Dudley Do-Right. That's not that interesting to me. Someone who's kind of gooey and messy, but has the decency somewhere in them, or not. That's what's interesting.
Well, speaking of flawed characters, Jerry Shaw in Eagle Eye has kind of a lot going on there, especially with a brother who gives off that Captain America vibe.
Yeah, well, there's the familial,
Yeah.
age-old brothers. That wrestling match.
Even going back to Family and Insomnia, I remember when Dormer calls Hap's family afterwards. So really there's common
the
thread.
Biggest lie ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember watching that and his daughter picked up, and I was like, wow, that makes it hit even harder, because then it reminds you there's a family behind all these guys.
That was actually Al Pacino's idea.
Oh, wow.
Because it wasn't in the script. And he was like, I want that phone call.
Oh.
That's an actor for you.
Yeah, that's how
he's an actor, but he's also an opera singer.
Oh,
so
okay.
I don't mean metaphorically.
Oh, I thought you meant literally.
No,
for
metaphorically.
a second.
So he wanted his aria, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actors love to die.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted that. And I'm so glad, because it's such a great scene, but he wanted to play that scene, which is like, I am lying to my best friend's family who I've known for years and years and years, and I'm the cause of the death. Yeah. So really good scene.
Yeah, it just plays within itself very well.
Exactly.
In my mind. And just going with messy characters, I just thought he was very interesting in both the representation of obviously Insomnia being his guilt, but just kind of watching how he interacts with Hillary Swank's character, because he's kind of this messy, pushing the boundaries of what's okay cop, and she's very by the book, young and kind of energetic about things. Was it interesting at all, I guess, writing them as almost foils to each other?
Well, yeah, and in the original there is no Hillary Swank character, and when I saw the original, which I think is such a great movie, I remember thinking like, no one should remake this. This is a great movie. And then I stopped and I thought, you know what? I can work with this, because what I want to write is the subtext of this movie. Because a Scandinavian movie is very low key and has like 4 pieces of dialogue, which I love, but there's sort of a coldness to it, and it's sort of inscrutable. But there's so much the stuff that's burbling under there. So I thought, pulling that out, that's what you used for the adaptation. But I just felt like we needed a character who was an access point for us as an audience. And it just furthers the pain of Will Dormer to have a really innocent, pure character look up to him so much when he's done pretty much the worst thing that you can do. So it's all about duality. So he's always playing these 2 parts, right? Yeah. Who he is and then what he's done. So all it was just like every scene with her was like rubbing salt in the wound of his guilt. Yeah. And she had no idea, obviously.
Yeah, and then she starts to catch on as the movie goes. But then
passing on of the mantle also in that regard.
Yeah, and at the end, because she's
Right.
seeing him for who he is, despite all of the mistakes and the messiness. As we're going back to
And
messiness.
he's completely vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, messiness, I think, is very much, as his family, a common thread, because nobody's perfect in real life. So everybody's just a tinge messy.
Yeah.
But talking about movies you've got coming up, you've got a lot of exciting stuff in the works. You've got the Verity adaptation, The Woman in Cabin 10, and a thriller with Angelina Jolie. Can you tell me anything about these upcoming projects?
The thriller with Angelina Jolie is super fun. It's like a good Saturday night. You'd watch it with your dad, like a Saturday afternoon movie.
Yeah.
She plays a serial killer, but you kind of like her.
Yeah.
And she's perfect. So they are actually looking for a director for that right now. But she's had a big hand in that creatively, which is great. She's very bright and very insightful, and really has striven to find the humanity in that serial killer character. Woman in Cabin 10 is a script that I wrote, and then the project got bought by another studio, and they didn't want to pay turnaround fees.
Okay.
So actually they trashed my script, and they're doing a whole
sorry.
new one. But thank you for putting it on my CV. And then Verity is shooting right now. Colleen Hoover book. I was, again, one of a few writers on that. But my draft got the director, Michael Showalter, who I think is a fantastic director. And it seems like it's going swimmingly. My manager sent me a picture of Josh Hartnett and Anne Hathaway, in costume, running down the streets of New York. So it looks like it's going well.
Yeah, and such a popular book to begin with.
Yeah. Popular book and an incredibly popular author. So
Yes, very much so. And the Angelina Jolie thriller especially should be really interesting, given the complexity that's going to be behind the serial killer persona.
Yes, because I'm not going to give it away.
Yeah, that's
I'm not
fair.
going to give it away, but it's sort of like a two-hander. It's her and another character, and they go head-to-head, a younger character, and they go head-to-head, and there's a bunch of twists and everything. But I think it's juicy.
That sounds like a great Saturday night movie.
Exactly. Get your popcorn.
Yeah, that's unfortunately all the time we have today. But thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank
I
you.
thought it was fascinating to learn about you, your life, and your career that I've enjoyed and so many others have
Thank you
appreciated
so much.
as well.
I really appreciate that.
That's all we have for this WOLV-TV Spotlight. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.